Welcome to the Starting Over podcast. I am your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of HeroClix. It's been a pretty awesome day today. I bought a good amount of 10th anniversary. I was able to make a good exchange with my friend Mega Lotus Man, and I will say God is good because I pulled the Chase. What is it? Chase Captain America, and I sort of traded it to make up for the difference that I owe Mega Lotus Man for the figures that I got, and from his doubles. And so I was fortunate enough today to pick up some of the following. I was able to get Batman, Wonder Woman, John Jones, Green Lantern Common, and one of the, I think it's rares. Nightwing, Blue Beetle Jamie Rise, both Flashes, both Brainiacs. Actually, I ended up having both Blue Beetles, come to think of it. I didn't get Martian Manhunter and I didn't get Lex Luthor, but I was able to buy Superman, not the Chase. And then from my Marvel pulls and individual buying off of Mega Lotus Man, I ended up with, let's see, I got the Common Thor, I think it is. Oh no, I didn't get the Common Thor. I pulled the rare. I got really blessed. I pulled a bunch of rares out of the countertop display. So, yeah, I pulled, now, I'll tell you what I actually pulled, but I'll tell you what I have, in the end. I ended up getting Iron Man, the Common Storm, the Thing, Worldbreaker Hulk, Magneto, and then the non-rare Magneto, and then I ended up with Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix as my extra, and of course Captain America. I bought a little bit of individual boosters, and I pulled Captain America. I pulled what else did I pull? I knew I pulled the actual good thing, the number 11 thing, which was uncommon. I pulled Thor number, 16. And I pulled the Chase, and I think that was all that I bought. Then I also pulled out of my DC, I pulled Batman, I pulled Blue Beetle, classic Blue Beetle. I pulled Brainiac in the chair, and Rare Flash. So, I mean, like, overall, in Robin. Yeah, I like that, yeah. But, and Catwoman, that's actually good. The 68-point Catwoman. So, I mean, overall, my individual pulls weren't that bad. Just some insight. Now, if you, like, squeeze the box, you can tell if, like, if the rare Magneto's in there. But after feeling the weight of Dark Phoenix and Superman and a few others, I know some people could say they're heavier, and they are slightly, but at the same time, when I could feel by hand, I couldn't really tell. And when I picked out all the heaviest figures from both DC and Marvel, I didn't cherry pick a Superman, nor did I cherry pick a Worldbreaker Hulk. So for the pure fact that by weight or just packaging, that the Blue Beetle, the classic Blue Beetle, is almost, it feels heavy. Same with Catwoman, the 68-point Catwoman. She's made of denser plastic. So you can find Magneto. He's obviously, like, distinctly heavier. Not like MODOK distinctively heavier, but distinctive enough for you to notice, like, oh yeah, that's Catwoman. Or I mean, sorry, you can notice if it's Magneto. So, but that's mainly it. I don't see anyone cherry picking out Dark Phoenix. I think it's a lot harder, and I did go through the realms and look at, like, every method of picking, figures. I will say also, it seemed like in the back half of the display is where the DC chases were. So if you were able to, if you're looking straight up on an unopened display, uh, and then the two batches of six, the top layer, the first one that's the furthest back, and the one directly below it, the second layer, the furthest back, those were where I pulled chases out of when I was helping my friend Megalotus Man unbox his stuff. He bought a case of each. So I will say this, having a case of each yielded a complete set, and you can end up in a situation where there are some, you'll have one of one uncommon in like four or five of one common, or have two or three of a uncommon, and you might end up in a situation where you're able to have a double in rares. Fortunately, his double in rares were Dark Phoenix and Superman, which are the pretty much the two primary rares that I wanted. I do want a rare Lex Luthor, but I'm willing to wait for the market prices to go down, even though I could probably get them for like $4. I'm betting he's probably going to drop because I know a lot. His average mean is between $4 to $10 on eBay, so I'll just wait for that to go down. Now you might be saying, well, Dark Logos, you lucky man, you had all that stuff happen to you. So what's today's show about? Frankly, my friends, today's show is about advancing through the 300-point meta now that dynamics have changed. Okay, and I think last show I sort of talked briefly about this triangle that's emerged, and I end up having an interesting tournament, and you can almost sort of dub this show, why Iron Man broke my meta. Please give me a refund. Or Tony Stark, you owe me money. But we had a conversation after a tournament that I ended up having to judge at a venue near me. It was Game Cafe in Independence, Missouri. So you might catch me there on Friday if you ever decide to challenge me. If so, give me heads up and just don't drop in and be like, Dark Logos, we challenge you. I like to actually bring something competitive or at least fun. Maybe a little bit of both. But anyway, what ended up happening is I was able to judge because the normal judge was overloaded at the front desk. And I watched several 300-point games. And my friend Megalotus Man played 225-point Iron Man with the Gauntlet with a AIM Renegade as his full team. And it owned pretty hard. Pretty hard from every game that I saw. And one of the biggest disadvantages was when you start going up against teams with the Gauntlet, he has a distinct advantage because their main attacker is the one with the Gauntlet. But when you start when he dealt with a team that really didn't use the Gauntlet, there was some minor problems, but it wasn't anything he couldn't overcome. So with all of the things that I was able to play test in a short period of time, I came to a couple of understandings that are emerging in the meta now. The first thing is that 150 points or more, better if you invest that into a piece, it has to bring high levels of offensive and defensive capabilities outside of standard powers. So let's look back at Gen Con, for example, where you have the gentleman that played Leech, Doctor Strange with the Marvel Knights ATA, and with Beta Ray Bill. That 150, I think there was a gauntlet on there somewhere. I'm not quite sure on that. But within that framework, you see several things. You see a 150-point figure that is a solid attacker, but at the same time, you have backup. But its defensive capabilities are mainly in how it allows Leech and Doctor Strange to survive from ranged attacks, pretty much just having complete immunity. and then using those formations to, in and of itself, shield Beta Ray Bill. Okay, so with Iron Man being in existence and Catwoman being in existence in your meta now, you're going to start seeing people sort of say, oh, I like to have my primary attacker with a gauntlet, or I would love to run a full gauntlet, but what I most likely am going to do is I'm going to put a partial gauntlet or a full gauntlet on my secondary attacker, and then have my primary attacker give some other secondary effect or third tier effect that helps my whole team. The next thing that you're going to just sort of notice as an issue, and I'm staring at Iron Man's dial right now, is, and this goes back to this triangle that is forming into the meta. First, you have relic and resource use on team. The second is anti-figures. The second point on your triangle is figures that are anti-resource, anti-relic. And then finally, you have teams that have no relic, no resource. Okay? So easily we can see there's two syntheses that can happen in the game. The first synthesis is anti-relic with relic combined to form a very strong team. The second option is anti-relic with no relic forces that can combine into another strong team. The biggest problem with the meta right now, where testing needs to come in, and in all honesty, it's most likely not going to go, is anti-gauntlet, anti-resource tech with no gauntlet being used or resource used on the team. With the synthesis of those two ideas, the mind of the average player is going to be befuddled, because we have almost a year of ingrainment into our brains that high level play equals resource dials. And even longer than that, we've had high level play equals relic use. Okay? Or let's rephrase that. High level play is use of 3D objects. Now, what that allows us to come back and say is, I can use kryptonite, I can use lanterns, but I can use those objects, but I don't need to use the gauntlet. And Tony Stark does nothing against, Iron Man does nothing against me having a kryptonite on the field. You know, and so you're at a certain position. Another thing that I find quite interesting is Lex Luthor getting within very, how can I put it, within dangerous territory of Iron Man or any main attacker. And then I'm talking about the Lex Luthor that like generates is the rare one. Lex Luthor that generates kryptonite, and you would definitely be playing him at 160. But the fact that you're able to get him into very close proximity using his Boom Tomb Sneak attack, okay, and then after it resolves, he can move half his movement or less, and he pretty much can do a ranged combat action as a free action. So he gets to take a shot in for free. But then, for the fact that you can give Lex Luthor a power action, he can place a special object whose name includes kryptonite from outside the game into an adjacent square. Now, the thing that has to get ruled is, does this go into your sidebar? I think it will, which in a 300-point game can be hurtful if you're planning to use a bunch of AEs. So with Lex Luthor, I would say is the best way to maximize him, if the ruling is that objects do count part of your sideboard and have to be registered, then you would have to pick a force that doesn't use AEs or isn't dependent on AEs, or uses AEs in a light way in which you have maybe one or two figures that come from out of the game. Definitely not using a split mechanic. Merged, yes. Split, no. Because you can, as long as your base figure is, let's say your base figure is Avengers Prime, and you know what you're going to split into. it's probably a bad idea to have Lex Luthor. But if you're starting off with Wasp and Ant-Man, and then you have Wasp, Ant-Man on your sidebar, then that's a little bit different. Because then when you're able to merge, then that Wasp and Ant-Man can come in off your sidebar. And then during the game, even though your sidebar is larger, but initially your space is that you're given legally is not abused. You're in the legal limit, and then by the fact that they were able to merge allows for extra figures for two figures to take the spot of one. If that makes sense. If you have any confusions, just make sure you email me and I'll try to explain it as best as I can, okay? The next thing that we can see is with this thought synthesis is that we're going to be looking at a sub, and I never would have thought I said this, a sub 135 primary attacker. And again, I never thought I'd say this. Go back and I don't know if it's properly uploaded or not. If not, please let me know. The Blip channel is up, but I wouldn't depend on it. It pretty much the conversation you have on Chaos War and looking at Chaos War Thor. If you compare, just go in to your friendly search engine for clicks and type Thor. Okay. And then what I want you to do is I want you to compare the Thor number 16 with the Thor number 202 from Chaos War Fast Force. Is that the one from the Fast Forces? No, that's one from the Gravity Feed. And then compare the one number 2 Thor from the Chaos War Fast Forces. And so, once you get those together, even if you can pull those figures out yourself, I want you to notice some things, okay? First off, how many clicks of running shot do you have? Well, let's look. Well, how many clicks of running shot do you have with the 120-point Thor? 2. How many clicks of running shot do you have from the Chaos War Gravity Feed? Gravity Feed Thor. You have 3 clicks of running shot. For the Thor from the Fast Forces, you have 1. Okay, how many clicks of charge do you have on the Thor with from the 10th anniversary? 2 in dial. How many clicks of charge do you have on Thor from the Gravity Feed? You have 2. How many clicks do you have from the Thor from the Fast Forces? You have 4. Okay, when you start looking at your damage numbers, all 3 start off with 4 damage. Which click can we always depend on? Our first click. Okay? Now, if we look at our second click, just in case, because only one of these figures has Indomitable, which is the 125-point Thor from the Fast Forces, we can see that now the 125-point Thor has charge, 10 attack, 3 damage, whereas the Thor from the Gravity Feed has running shot, 10 attack, pulse wave, 17 defense, 3 damage. But the Thor that's 120 points has a 10 attack, invulnerability, and 4 damage. Well, while all 3 Thors pretty much have some form of mobility, the 120-point Thor is able to really just consolidate its offense into a very tiny package. Now, having 2 lightning bolts gives it the 10th anniversary Thor the target flexibility that the Gravity Feed Thor has. But at the same time, when we start looking at the damage numbers that are available to pretty much the 10th anniversary Thor, we can see overall, dial-wise, that he has better stats than the Thor from the Fast Forces. So, what's our point difference? We have 120 point for the 10th anniversary one. We have 175 points for the Gravity Feed, and we have 125 points for the Fast Forces. While the Fast Forces does have Indomitable, and then I'm not going to overlook that, he doesn't fly, which I didn't pay attention until now that he didn't fly. The other thing to definitely notice about the dial with the 10th anniversary is that even though he goes into toughness, his last 2 clicks of charge, he ends up with high damage values, very low defense values. That's because he's modeled after Ultimate Store. But having high damage values to just crank up the offense. And then not only that, having the Ultimates, not Ultimates TA, the Avengers Initiative TA, pretty much just allows him to pick whatever targets he has. And so really you can, I hate to say it like this, in reality, in a range game, you can pretty much by Fox just say, hey, in your head, that by having that team ability, that you really have +1 to attack. It doesn't seem like that, but in all average, you usually have +1 to attack in a range game. In a melee game, you don't. But in a range game, you're going to assume that your opponent is going to have use of hindering terrain in some form or fashion. Okay, and you just pretty much ignore that. So stat-wise, your opponent had a +1, but your team ability negates that +1, or you can even say it counts for that +1. So it's just some alternative thinking just to add in there. Now, when we look at dial length, when we compare the 120 to the 125 and to the 175, that the 10th anniversary is 2 clicks shorter than the 175 and is 1 click shorter than the 125. So we're looking for, from the, Fast Forces one, the Chaos War Fast Forces, we pretty much said for 5 more points, we got an extra target, we dropped Indomitable, we can fly, we can see through stealth, and we have 1 click less of life. That's a pretty excellent deal. Also, this Thor can be a taxi, and then also this Thor can team up with Iron Man, and you still have space to put another figure on your team. Actually, you'd probably fit like 2 Mockingbirds, I assume. Yeah, 2 Mockingbirds at 25 points if you want to. And that's an option. You have 55 points to use. There's nothing stopping you from having a theme team. So I said all that to say this, is that we are now in a position where high offense, high damage can be done for under 150 points. Looking at high offense, high damage at over 150 points, the damage values, you have to start looking at 5 damage. The new Brainiac does that at 160. It generates high damage and decent stats. The problem comes in is you have Superman enemy, which makes it completely overcosted. Superman, like I said previously on the last show, is that Superman enemy has to be redone for it to be valuable in the modern day meta. Until that happens, it's not. Even though I know many people will say, oh yeah, he's a great dial, but you also have to think, if he did not have Superman enemy TA, how much cheaper would that dial be? Okay, so we've pretty much established that we are looking at a high offensive meta. We are also established that there's going to be a synthesis. Let's look at that. Let's take a step back and let's look at that synthesis between anti-relic resource tech and having a relic resource on your team. And I think this is the most common thinking that you're going to be dealing with. The first thing that we're going to establish is that from this point on, your gauntlet cannot be on your primary attacker. Period. You can't afford it to be. The next thing is let's say you have a 500-point game. It is better for you to play Iron Man at his 125 points and have him just pretty much, set up and ready to just come in and do damage. Or even you can say in a 500-point game, hey, I'm playing Iron Man at 225. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my gauntlet on another figure on my team. Now, here's what will happen. I have this big, huge attacker. Then I have my gauntlet on my team. My big, huge attacker is Iron Man. If my opponent decides to say, hey, I'm going to put my gauntlet on Iron Man, then on his Iron Man, then it's like, fine, go ahead, put your gauntlet on Iron Man. My secondary attacker just won't attack your Iron Man. My secondary attacker will go to town on the rest of your team, while your Iron Man fights fiercely to take out my secondary attacker. Okay? My primary attacker, which is my own Iron Man from DC 10th Anniversary, is going to be attacking nonstop your Iron Man. And when we start actually looking at the design of 10th Anniversary Iron Man, we see several things. And this is just breaking it down. And I'm starting it off at the 225 point. And then we can sort of look again at the 125 points a little bit more. If you're looking for just straight up having just baller damage, then you can say like, hey, he starts off with 4, which is very solid. The issue is the dual target energy explosion is a little more of like a crowd control thing. Definitely when you're dealing with that defend JSA defenders like defense sharing and or Hydra. Hydra. Thou art my bane some days, and then some days I just nuke you. But Hydra. He starts off with pretty much Perplex and Pulse Wave. And then this allows him to go straight into attacking the opposing Iron Man. And with the opposing Iron Man starting at an 18 or 17 defense, with an 11 attack, 1 Perplex is going to put him into pretty much almost guaranteed hit range. 2 Perplex is definitely guaranteed hit range with a 13 attack. All right. So automatically off the bat, the 225 point Iron Man can come in, running shot, pulse wave, running shot, shoot. The opposing Iron Man with the gauntlet. The opposing Iron Man with the gauntlet can pulse wave all he wants. At most, he's going to do 1 damage to my Iron Man. Okay, let's say he does that 1 damage. Now I'm on Psychic Blast. I don't even have to get close to you anymore. I just hit you with Psychic Blast. Okay, and then I hit you for 3 with Psychic Blast, or I can perplex up my damage to 4, and then by that time, it's pretty much crippled. Okay, the Iron Man, the opposing Iron Man is crippled. He has to run back. The other thing that you can do is, and this is where we start looking at tech intricacies, which create opportunities. Okay, I want you to go to the Fast Forces War of Light set. I want you to look at Star Sapphire for a moment. Starfast Sapphire's Amoris Truce. At the beginning of the game, choose another friendly character and an opposing character, each 150 points or less. Okay? The chosen characters can't target each other with an attack or deal damage to each other until Star Sapphire is KO'd. Okay? Now, let's rewind. Okay. Starting off the game, I decide that I'm going to be playing a 500 point game. I am going to play Star Sapphire. I'm going to play Thor from the 10th Anniversary. That pretty much gives me Avengers Initiative. I'm going to be playing Iron Man, and I'm going to pack him at 125. My opponent is deciding that he's going to use a gauntlet on a figure of 150 points. Then use the rest of his points on something interesting. Okay? What I can do is say, hey, I'm going to use Star Sapphire. Star Sapphire is going to pick what other figure? Let's say my opponent has a Psychic Blast or a Pulse Wave figure. Okay? I'll say this. Yes, Psychic Blast or Pulse Wave figure, which is my biggest concern, or a huge charge exploit figure. Has a huge charge range, and they're under 150 points. What I'm going to say is, okay, you can't attack my Iron Man. Now, my opponent is really, really dependent on that secondary attacker to attack my Iron Man, because my Iron Man can just go to town on his gauntlet figure. and his gauntlet figure is going to be at a disadvantage. Okay? So that's one thing that he doesn't want to deal with, is that I have this figure that's indomitable, that can attack 2 turns in a row, who has Avengers keyword, so I can add Secret Avengers ATA, so it makes him really hard to be outwitted. And now my opponent has to scramble to find a way to kill Star Sapphire. Now, what have I done in this analysis right here? My Thor is still on the map, and he can do a good amount of damage. Is my opponent concerned about Thor? No. Iron Man is going to be having a field day with his Perplex and Psychic Blast and Running Shot. Is my opponent concerned about my Iron Man? Oh, yes. Greatly, because he's a threat to his gauntlet user. But who's the most dangerous thing on the map? My Star Sapphire. Because my Star Sapphire has added another level of metaing to the situation. Because now my opponent has to decide, okay, do I try to go after Iron Man through some meticulous way, or do I gun after Star Sapphire? And pretty much in the meantime, Thor is like, for Asgard, poof, lightning into your face, just hitting people. Okay, now if my opponent goes after Thor, is that a problem? No, because Iron Man is continually putting pressure on their gauntlet holder. If my opponent goes after Star Sapphire, is that a problem? Not really. I paid 75 points for her. If my opponent doesn't effectively kill Star Sapphire, then guess what? She's on support and mind control. Okay, and plus Star Sapphire has ranged combat expert, 7 range, 2 targets herself. So she can slow the game down by just end capping front dial and then end dial using support and running around and being protected. Okay? So what ends up happening is that regardless what the rest of my team is, rest of my team can be bunk. I've created huge amounts of pressure on my opponent for the pure fact that I've completely restricted their options, and their main means of offense are locked down in 2 methods. Method number 1, I just said, hey, you can't use the gauntlet on my guy. Method number 2 is I said, now you can't attack me. And then I could add in, okay, I can in some form or fashion say, oh, I put a partial gauntlet on Thor. Or, oh, I put a full gauntlet on Thor. Even though that would make Thor overpriced. I could say, oh, I have a third attacker. I put a partial gauntlet on him. So out of all that, if my third tier attacker isn't really a threat, my third tier attacker can run around all day and do whatever he wants or that figure wants to do. I want that figure to do. And there is little to no punishment. Now, again, I am sort of speaking in a 500-point game because it's a lot more easier and lax in the thinking. Okay, because you can say, oh, I can pack this, I can pack that, I can pack these other things. In a 1,000-point game scale, then we encounter problems. And let me back up. When we really remember we talked about what is our midpoints, what are our low points, what are our midpoints, and what are our high points. We have that 100 to 300 is pretty much our low end of gameplay. 400 to about 800 is our mid-level. Over 800 is when we start getting into the high point range and how the meta warps. Because definitely once you get over 800 points, you're starting to look at Colossals in Friends. Okay? Sometimes it's Colossals, one Colossal, but most of the time it's Colossals and Friends. Very few people play a Colossal in the point range, which allows you to just pack one Colossal. Just functionally, it's just not efficient. You're better off playing multiple Colossals at variable point ranges to maximize efficiency. But in a high point game, a little trick like Star Sapphire isn't going to stop the massive amount of offense that's going to be going on. Okay? So when we start looking at high point games, then we have to start looking at other various tricks of keeping our anti-gauntlet person alive while we're still packing the gauntlet. Other ways of keeping Catwoman alive, other things of keeping Tony Stark alive. And I also believe that if people come back to this episode from the distant future into what would be the past, and they actually listen to this podcast, they're going to say, oh, okay, this figure came out, this other figure came out, this other figure came out. They do similar things that Catwoman and Tony Stark, I mean, I keep saying Tony Stark, that Iron Man does. Okay? So if we can't play Mother May I with Star Sapphire efficiently, then we start looking at other ways of playing Mother May I with your opponent. If we go back to War of Light, Atrocitus. Atrocitus is a big, big Mother May I game. Because what Atrocitus says is, hey, guess what? Everyone within 5 squares has Battle Fury. Everyone, including Atrocitus. Okay, so then I can play 175 point Atrocitus. You now have to get through 7 clicks. And whatever else I pack. Plus I packed full power Tony. I said I'll have to do it again. Full power Iron Man. And then I also packed Catwoman, and I also packed my gauntlet. Okay, so the thing is that when we start looking at high level games, that option of no gauntlet starts to dissipate. Okay, using no gauntlet to beat gauntlet and to beat anti-gauntlet. What happens in a high-level game, the more probable synthesis is gauntlet and anti-gauntlet tech, and I'm going to turn this triangle into a square. Shenanigans, our number one tactic on the Starting Over podcast. And again, gimmicks and shenanigans is part of the game now. I hate to say it, and you have to just really plan for somebody to have some weird level of shenanigans. It's not quite card game level shenanigans of, oh, I can't draw, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do all these other things. But just shenanigans of, you can't make ranged attacks, fool. You have Battle Fury. It's like, you can't charge. Because I have Dr. Fate. Things like that, which creates disruption for my opponent. Then once I add in these level of disruption, then my opponent is at a disadvantage because my opponent's team is designed around it functioning properly. And then you also have to factor in the same amount of disruption for your own team. Okay, so just sort of taking a step back, we look at Atrocitus. Now I have Battle Fury, but then let's say let's go out on a limb. We go into that 800 point game, and the end of that mid range territory. I can say I can play a Frost Giant champion, and while Atrocitus may lock down a cluster, my opponent is eventually going to spread out once they fully realize what Atrocitus is going to do. Then I need to come back and say, okay, what's my secondary option? My secondary option can be Frost Giant champion. Okay, so then I know 2 pieces that I need to lock down on his team. Or I know 2 pieces I need to lock down on the other end of the field. These are the 2 figures I'm going to lock down on the other end of the field to make sure that they cannot use ranged attacks. And I'm going to use this for the following. I'm going to stall to buy time to spin the gauntlet. I'm going to use it time to kill their gauntlet wielder. And I'm also going to use it to spend time to kill their anti-gauntlet, anti-resource person. You see how that is? Now all of a sudden we've added in multi-layers of thinking, which my opponent is now at a great disadvantage. Because my opponent is going to be like, well, doop-de-doo, I put Galactus with the gauntlet, and then, check this, Billy, I pack Iron Man, and then I bring Catwoman because I have the points. Ha 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 ha. Actually, that probably don't work that won't work at 800. Let's downgrade Galactus to Dormammu. Okay, so now we have Dormammu with the full gauntlet, with full packed out Iron Man and Catwoman. Now, you might say, well, that's sort of, not that scary. Hey, it's the best I can do off the top of my dome. Just bear with me, okay? We have a interaction that team has only really like one figure that can really be good at melee. So Atrocitus and then sending out a Frost Giant champion could really cause high levels of disruption. Okay, definitely on Dormammu. Dormammu is hyper dependent on range, and if Atrocitus doesn't even base, Atrocitus stays 4 squares out, so that Dormammu always has to get away. You can try to say like, oh, he bases Iron Man or something like that. You don't really want that. You want the ability to continue moving around, okay? And then when needed, put in for the attack. The one thing I learned from listening to various battle reports about the Thanos battles that happened is that for Uatu to carry Unspoken, pull him out, and for Unspoken to be exactly the right distance before he reemerges is quite essential, because every turn, no matter how the battle flows, Unspoken is able to reestablish a lockdown. That's the thing, to come back, reestablish a lockdown. Okay, so that's enough for that for right now. The other element that comes into my mind from this set is why Battlefield Promote. I want that to marinate in your head. Okay, why am I going to Battlefield Promote? Now, let's take a moment, play Jeopardy with yourself. When did we see Battlefield Promotion? And so just give yourself a moment. Pause it if you need to. I'll be right here, taking a nice drink of water while you think. Got your answer? Hopefully you have your answer by now. We saw him Brave and the Bold with the Checkmate agents, which were quite excellent. And we saw figures that had to do pretty much sometimes silly prerequisites that were completely random so that they could turn into something better, or really most of the time it was something worse because you specifically had those figures on that team for that reason. Now, with that being said, when you start looking at 10th anniversary set, you have to ask yourself, why am I going to Battlefield Promote any of these figures? I really want you to ask yourself that answer, because I know greed can it can clog our mind. I know for really the last few sets, WizKids sort of has really pushed that gotta catch 'em all feeling. But ask yourself, what makes you want to Battlefield Promote? Okay. You should have your answer by now. And I want you to say that thing out loud. If you have somebody else nearby that's not listening to the podcast, just ignore them. It's you and me talking right now. Okay, I hear your response. And what I want you to ask is, if you need it for that reason, why didn't you pay for that figure in the first place? Point-wise, not in cash. You were low on points, or you did not want to put your full design behind it fully, or what you wanted to play didn't go into sync with what a Battlefield promoted figure would have, and you wouldn't be able to fit everything else you wanted. Am I correct? Most likely, yes. You might be saying, Dark Logos, you're reading my mind, man. What's up with that? That's really weird. I mean, it's sort of obvious. These are obvious conclusions. Battlefield promotion, when we look at Battlefield promotion, it's a gimmick to try to make you buy more stuff. It doesn't functionally have a base in tactics. Because what you're saying is, when you use Battlefield promotion, is I need a set of random events to happen so that I can get more for my points than what I paid. so that I have a random chance of something better happening. Now, let's take a step back. Name two figures, the point range doesn't matter, that can generate or create an effect that increases the point value on your team. There's two. I've hyped them so much in the last 5 months. Last 5 months. Yeah, that's about it. There's at least two, and if you listen to the podcast long enough, you're going to know what they are. More water, more thinking time, more water for me. You come to your conclusion? Okay. First off, we have, guess who? Ultron. Ultron generates drones. Ultron can use the drones to increase the amount of figures on the board, which also increases the amount of points your team is worth. Next up is Master Mold. Master Mold generates figures that increases the amount of points on the board. Now, even though if you do KO a promoted figure, it doesn't add to what the promoted figure's points are. It just adds what the initial, you could say, recruit figure is. Now, with that in mind, what I want you to think about really closely is the following. If I Battlefield promote, let's say I'm Battlefielding promoting my Alan Scott Green Lantern into Hal Green Lantern, how much am I actually, what am I doing this for? Well, I could be doing it because I need damage reduction, but by that time in the game, my Green Lantern doesn't, is pretty low. I could be doing it. My Green Lantern Alan could be pretty low. I could say I could be doing it because I really want to use that construct ability because I'm facing someone with stealth. Well, why didn't I have anti-stealth on my team already? Okay, you could say, well, I would like some extra clicks, and that is it. The only reason at this stage that really you want to Battlefield promote is because you want extra clicks. You want to stall the game out. It looks like you're about to die, and so you really want to stall the game out. That's it. But the problem comes in is this. Let's compare, let's say Green Lantern, Hal and Green Lantern Alan together. When we compare the two, guess what? Alan starts off with way better defensive values, way better offensive powers, and really stable offensive values. Decent movement, really better movement average than Hal. When we look at attack, the attacks are probably about dead even average, really close. Defensive values are really still better on Alan. So why do I want to Battlefield promote into Green Lantern Hal? Doesn't quite make sense, does it? Oh, I know why I want to Battlefield promote. Because he has one more click of life. You Battlefield promote it for one more click of life and the possibility of getting some free healing. Well, if we just mitigate all that and just say, I packed a medic, then I am in so much better situation. Because the thing we can't forget with the Battlefield promotion is this. You land on the same click. So if you're on click 6 with Green Lantern Alan, you're going to be on click 6 with Green Lantern Hal. Okay, now, here's where somebody might say, well, let's say by some miracle that I'm able to take Marvel Girl, and then I can get all these TKs off, and then I can get Dark Phoenix out, and then I stay on click 1, then I'll be able to go to click 1 on Dark Phoenix, and I'll have a 300-point Dark Phoenix. Well, first off, you start at the blue starting line. And the blue starting line, I think, is the 200-point value. So you won't get a 300-point Dark Phoenix if you're able to get off the miracle amount of prerequisites to make that functional. Okay, next off, you would have to say, by that stage of the game, after Marvel Girl has done that many attacks and not died and been on first click, that she's able to transform into a Dark Phoenix. The game should automatically have been over by that time. Okay, you shouldn't have progressed to the point where Marvel Girl is the only one left, and then by magic that she turns into Dark Phoenix after all said and done. Okay, so that's most likely not going to happen. If she's in that close to TK objects around, then yes, she should be dead. And if not dead, severely wounded, and on some lower click. So overall, what we can see is pretty much Battlefield Promotion is bunk. Doesn't really do us much good. There is very little advantage to providing Battlefield Promotion in the set, other than to give you that illusion of, oh, I got to get more, I got to get more, I got to get more, I got to get more. And that's sadly what WizKids has done recently. Okay. But sort of coming back to the main theme of where is our meta going? And I know I sort of went off, I went off a little bit. We can definitely see in those low point games that we're going to, don't waste your time investing in a main attacker over 150 points anymore. Pack a medic, pack some healing, pack some barrier, bring some form of anti-gauntlet tech, and then go at it. If you want to add in the gauntlet or not, that is up to you. The gauntlet cannot be put on a main attacker anymore. You have to put the gauntlet on a support figure or a secondary or third attacker. In mid-level games, you pack what you need to, but you most likely need to pack a higher level anti-gauntlet tech in, decide how you're going to use your gauntlet officially or not. You're still in that realm where you can decide to use it or not. Once you start getting to 800 points and higher, you're looking at a situation where you're using shenanigans, you are using gimmicks to disrupt your opponent, and then you're making sure that they cannot attack your gauntlet wielder with their anti-gauntlet tech, and that your anti-gauntlet tech is doing what it's supposed to do, or rephrase it, anti-relic or resource tech. Okay? So hopefully I've given you like an insight of where I feel that the meta is going. I know that a lot of people think it's going in a different place where bigger, badder figures are going to be running around and winning, but really not. Dark Phoenix is too cheap. Iron Man is too cheap at 125. Pretty much Green Goblin, after playtesting with him today, he's really cheap. The one that starts off with running shot and willpower, number 4. Even with 6 range, it doesn't really hurt him that much. And he comes in at 75 points. When we start, coming back again with, Wonder Woman's really cheap. We also got that Fast Forces Wonder Woman. Nightwing, welcome abuse. Just welcome. Hey, I have a theme team. I help. Oh, all those Spider-Man allies. Oh yes, hey, Nightwing, you're a leader. You're great. Bring us stealth so we can copy that jazz. Oh yes, yeah. When you even look at Blue Beetle, Jamie Rise, he's excellent for just cheap Psychic Blast. I mean, come on, man. Real cheap Psychic Blast, 94 points. Yes, you can get Archangel, but how many people have 30 points if they're new to the game to go get Archangel, really? Okay. Plus, you get probability control built in for your attacks. Archangel doesn't have that. So, overall, I think we're at a point now in the game where offense has tipped the scale. Defense is not as viable. And people might not want to admit it, but the Gauntlet provides a lot of defensive options. People's way of getting around defense was running shot pulse wave. Guess what? We've gotten a ton of running shot pulse wave. We've gotten a ton of psychic blast. We have things that completely nerf the Gauntlet. We have things that allow the individuals to still use gauntlets in hideout or relics in hideout. So what we might actually see is people trying to manage risk. You might see more kryptonite. For Golden Age, you might see more lanterns. You might see people playing bucket of water for whatever reason instead of the gauntlet, because people are going to feel the wrath of Iron Man, and he's coming to register you for everyone has metahuman powers. And I don't think there will be a civil war, but if there is, it's going to be lost. And the pretty much the battlefield, after all said and done, is going to have a big old monument to Tony Stark. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, email me at the startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. Startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any questions or anything you just want to talk to me about. One thing I got to give up, big up to is Robert Haynes. I ended up talking to him back and forth. And he brought up some interesting things about the analysis of pretty much Black Lantern Batman. That pretty much that Mole Man could be a very great combination with him, and that when he uses Pulse Wave, he would when Batman uses Pulse Wave, that he would be able to ignore Mole Man, who is within 4 range for mind control. And I went back and forth with him, and then I have to admit that I was wrong on that. The call, Mole Man would be a good combination with pretty much Black Lantern Batman. So big up to Robert Haynes on that. Also, let me know who you want to see back on the show. I know I keep mentioning Mega Lotus Man, and I keep intending, one Friday or Saturday to try to bring the mic to where I game at and letting pretty much everyone just talk into it and say what they're going to say about me and the meta and whatever else. So, if you really want to hear that, let me know. I might just end up doing that tomorrow if I remember. All right, that's pretty much it. Thank you for following me over to YouTube. I know it hasn't been the greatest transition, but I am trying to improve the show for your just enjoying pleasure and listening. That's it. And remember, we all have to start over sometime.